takes pleasure in attracting a stellar list of speakers that address today's most relevant issues. The club's place as a refuge for rich discussion and networking has never wavered after 123 seasons.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts, and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. My name is Anita McCuitt, and I am president of the Canadian Club Toronto and national leader of technology, media, and telecom at PwC. What do video games and politics have to do with each other? Well, in the recent US election, video games were a key tool in reaching a wide, whole new audience, many who were just old enough to vote for the very first time. Today, we're joined by a panel of industry leaders to learn how brands and politicians are using the popularity of video games and social media to get their message out. We'll also chat about the changing ways that we all consume and interact with entertainment and how marketers can use these platforms to reach their target audience. Today's panelists will tell us why these changing consumer patterns aren't just a trend, but rather a deeper shift and disruption that will have implications for data, access, fandom, and community. But before we dive into today's topic, here's some information about how you can participate with us. The click here to switch stream button helps if you find that your internet is slow. The video quality may decrease, but the audio should stay strong. And we do want your questions today. So if you have any questions for us, just click the questions tab, type them in the window, and they will go straight to our moderator. The Canadian Club is a nonprofit, and we've been gathering people together for 124 years. And it's because of our sponsors that we're able to do that. So thank you to today's event sponsor, Norton Rose Fulbright. We are grateful for your support today. Now to introduce today's panelists. Heidi Browning is Chief Marketing Officer for the NHL. Adrian Montgomery is the Chief Executive Officer of Enthusiast Gaming. And Allison Stern was the Digital Partnerships Manager for the Biden-Harris 2020 campaign. Today's discussion will be moderated by Amanda Lang, host of Bloomberg Markets on BNN Bloomberg. One of the club's traditions that has not changed in this virtual world is the toast that we make to our country at the start of every event. So if you have a drink nearby, please raise your glass, nod to the screen, and join me in a toast to Canada. To Canada. Amanda, I'll turn the Canadian Club podium over to you.
Thank you so much for that, Anita. I really appreciate it. And I'm delighted to be here with our panelists, and I'll ask all of them to unmute themselves now. As Anita mentioned, we're also very happy to take your questions, particularly because I know we have a lot of expertise joining us today, and your questions will help us direct the conversation where you want it to go. But I know from these three people that we have a lot of ground we can cover, a lot of knowledge of both current and historical about where we've been. So welcome, Adrian, Allison, Heidi. And I think where I'd like to start, because this is such a, I mean, in some ways it's new, in some ways it's as old as the hills. And we'll kind of dig into the ways that it differs. But Anita just alluded to the way this story came to the mainstream press's attention, really. And I know for you guys, it'll probably feel really late for it to have come to our attention. But it really was the Biden-Harris campaign choosing last October to run a 3-week campaign across Enthusiast Gaming's platforms, using games like Fortnite, reaching this whole new audience in what felt like a whole new way. So what I'm going to ask each of you to do, and I'll ask you to start, Adrian, and get the backstory from Allison, and then Heidi, please weigh in on how this is unfolding for you right now. How is gaming hitting your marketing viewpoint right now? But Adrian, go back to last fall and this notion that your platforms could be used in a slightly different way.
Well, first of all, thank you, Amanda, and it's great to be here with Heidi and Allison. Certainly one of the proudest things we ever did was to play a small role in helping the Biden team execute their vision and their strategy, which was to engage with young people. And for us, we're a company that reaches 300 million people a month, mostly Gen Zs, mostly millennials. And the mere fact that a presidential campaign recognized that gaming is a core part of young people's identities. And if you're going to have meaningful conversations with them, you've got to come to their turf. You've got to speak to them in their language. And I think the fact that a presidential campaign recognized that and crafted a strategy around that was exceptional.
Allison, from the point of view of the campaign, how did this unfold? When did the idea germinate, and when did you kind of figure that this was the way to reach this group?
I think from day one on the campaign, well before I even joined, there was a strategy of reaching people where they are, and President Biden is a deeply empathetic person, and one of his core strengths is connecting with people across the country and on the campaign trail. And when faced with the global pandemic, where for safety reasons, people couldn't be out and about in the same way, there was a strategy to reach people where they are on the internet. And I think it all started with that. And gaming was just one, small piece of the puzzle. There was a digital team of 200 people, and led by really strong leaders who wanted to find ways to reach people where they are. And that included, through Facebook content, through social media, through gaming, through cooking videos and dog videos, and through new and emerging platforms. And there was just really a focus on wanting to connect with people and young people and bring young people into the political process and speak with them in a way that would connect with them.
Heidi, what about from your point of view in terms of how you're thinking about it, how long you've been thinking about it? Where does it fit, these new platforms fit into the NHL strategy?
Well, they're hugely important parts of our strategy for reaching and connecting with young people. We have a youth advisory board called the NHL Power Players. They're 13 to 17-year-old advisors who are absolutely passionate about everything, and they advise us on all things media, technology, culture, sports, hockey, you name it. And gaming is the number one topic that we spend a lot of time on, and it's about even more than esports. Of course, they love their NHL 21, but they also talk about gaming in terms of free-to-play games, right? And that whole gamification of everything in life. And what gaming does is it offers them the thing that's one of the many aspects that are really important to them, like personalization, the ability to customize, the ability to have your identity, as Adrian was talking about, of who you are today or who you wish you were. And so we also see it as a path to fandom, because when you get so involved in these video games and esports, you know every player, you know the rules, you also adopt players from other teams that might not even be in your own market, but you start to familiarize yourself with their skills, etc. So we think that is a huge opportunity for us to expand our fandom.
So I want to just take one step back because obviously for marketers, both for those with a message to sell, and that can be a political campaign, or it can be a business, or it can be a sports franchise, and the platform. In some ways, the game hasn't changed. You're just trying to get a message. You're trying to get it to the right people in a format that's appealing. But I imagine that a lot is different about crafting a campaign for this type of audience on this type of platform. So Adrian, I'm actually going to come at it kind of backwards and say, you're opening up your platform. It was Fortnite, one of the most popular games on the planet with a massive embedded audience. What's your sense of what the right tool is, or what it should look like, or how cautious are you about what the content looks like? Because you are, of course, the gatekeeper of the quality of your own material.
Yes, and I think that what is really important to stress here, and we have two other experts whose perspective would be rather illuminating, things have changed in a very significant way. And again, we all know in life that when you have a lot of choices, you have a lot of power. And when you have a lot of power, you can set terms. And I'll use it, if 4 people decided to show up on your driveway and make you an offer to buy your house. I don't know if you'd sell your house, but I certainly know that if you did, you'd be setting the terms of that purchase and sale agreement. And what we have to remember today, unlike when I was growing up, Amanda, and perhaps others, is young people from a content perspective, from an information perspective, can get what they want, when they want, where they want, how they want, and as much of it as they want. So they have the power, they have the choices, and they can set the terms. And so the most fundamental shift, and I think gaming is a conduit to that, but not the be all and end all, is when you have that power, you must recognize it as a company or as a campaign, and you have to speak to them and recognize that you've got to go to their turf and talk to them in terms they understand, because they can shut you off. And the other thing I would say, they're not just consuming content. They're not just taking what's on offer, as I would have. What's the movie theater playing? Do I like it? If they don't like content, they create their own. They share their own content. They make their own videos. So sometimes it's like, sorry, Disney, I know you spent $100 million on this movie, but my friend's cat is stuck in the laundry basket and that video's gone viral and I'm really digging it. That's changed so much. So the medium and the message have to be bespoke. And that's a service that Enthusiast Gaming and others in our industry provide.
Heidi or Allison, do you have something to add on that, just in terms of what the message needs to look like? And I guess Allison, you could be very specific here, although we should note for folks that haven't looked Allison up, she's an entrepreneur and a digital expert who actually created one of the tools used to measure online success of marketing campaigns. So even beyond Biden-Harris, what are some of the metrics that you're looking at here to say, what should this look like so we know it works?
I think so. Gaming is massive. It's not a small niche thing. It's literally the core entertainment for a broad swath of the population. I think it's like 75% of American households have a gamer in the household, and I think there's like 160 million gamers in the U.S. So it's really just massive. I mean, we're not talking about small niche. We're talking about reaching a really broad group of people, and this is how they entertain and get entertained. And I think Adrian brings up a really interesting point around the creator and creator content. I think when you're looking at gaming or even entertainment today, there's the game itself, and so for us, the Biden campaign did work in Fortnite and Animal Crossing. And there's the game itself, and that is a canvas and how you do work there. And then there's the work with the creators and influencers who play that game and who bring shed light and bring audiences to that game. And so it's kind of essential to do both, and to do both as authentically as possible. And then when you look at the creator landscape, and I co-founded a company called Tubular, which is the measurement standard for online video. And there's Tubular measured over 6 billion videos across the internet globally, and there's 25 million influencers, ranging from having 200 followers to hundreds of millions. And so understanding that landscape, understanding who the gamers are. And for the buying campaign, we only worked with US creators and influencers. So understanding, who were those US gamers and who was their following. And we worked with some that were big and some that were small. And so understanding all those different levers and how you create content and how you grow audience is essential for any type of campaign, whether it's a political campaign or a brand campaign. And it's essential to to work with the right people, whether it's right agencies or right creators to get the job done in that way.
And that Allison and Adrian, in that it doesn't matter if you're looking at the best esport gamer in the world or politician or major league sports star. What young people want is that human, personal connection with these people they view as the goats of their industries, right? And so that idea of, understanding, you might be the best athlete on ice, but they really want to know what you're like off the ice. What are your interests? How do you contribute back to society? What makes you a goat? What do you eat? How do you work out? What's your family like? These are really important aspects that round out the total picture of who these stars are. And so that's been a big shift for us, is really trying to peel back the visors and really showcase and share the lives and personalities of our athletes, because we know it's so important. And what we see in the numbers is that in sports, young people are following athletes first, then teams, and then leagues. And in fact, they'll even follow athletes of sports they don't even watch, just because they're interesting humans. So we step back and we call it humans are greater than highlights, because everyone can relate to a human moment, and you want to learn about how to be good enough to be captured in a highlight.
It occurs to me, and the Enthusiast Biden-Harris partnership, to me, highlights it, but I imagine this is a pitfall that could come up anywhere when you're embedding content into another platform. And that is, I think audiences of all types are quite well aware when there's a discrete message. So whether that's an old TV ad or your ad in your newspaper or even your pop-up ad, when it's embedded in the content, you're getting into new territory. And Adrian, I'm curious, were you worried at all that, across America, there are now 70 million young Republicans who think of Fortnite as the Democratic game? Do you expose yourself to aligning with certain messages and partners that could be a risk to your business?
That's certainly a concern and a valid one. And we've tried to stress, as proud as we are of our involvement in what we think, and kudos to Allison and her team, was a transformational moment in how American politics, particularly vis-a-vis Gen Zs, is going to be conducted in the future. Whatever small role we're fortunate to play, we're proud of that. But we also stress, to your point, that we are a media company. We're not taking sides, but we do play a bit of a different role than a radio station running ads or a television station running ads, because we're also helping, when asked, to craft more of a bespoke message to a unique audience. So the nature between the relationship between client and a company like ours changes as a result. So that is a valid concern. And one of the things Allison mentioned, which is so true, the rise of the influencer in social media cannot be ignored by marketers any longer. Young people are highly impressionable, highly influenced by the people that they follow on social media. And again, these gamers, as an example, and I recognize gamers aren't the only social media influencers, they are the most popular, but they're streaming 10, 12 hours a day. And as a result, the risk of them saying things and creating controversies is greater. This isn't prepackaged half an hour a day on Entertainment Tonight stuff. That's not the way of the world anymore. So the risk level does go up. Brand safety does become a more heightened concern, and companies like ours have to be more nimble and more sensitive to it.
One quick note on that: we were really in talking to creators and working with creators. We were really felt strongly that the message was about getting young people to vote. And we did not say, you need to say this or here are talking points. It was really meant to be, talking about why voting is important and focusing on that, and even focusing on issues that young people care about. And so two of the gamers that we worked with really seized on climate as an issue they cared deeply about. And there were pieces in the Fortnite game that talked to the connection between climate and the economy and jobs. And so, we didn't even give them the talking point of climate. They played the game. They sort of saw some of these pieces in it that spoke to them, and they called that out as they walked through because it spoke to them. And that was really our goal in working with young people, is to say, hey, we're trying to spread the message of voting, and we're trying to spread the message of what the Biden-Harris campaign stands for and cares about, and we'd like you to talk about what you feel connected to, and that worked really well, because I think it was an authentic message for everybody.
Which gets to a place that I'm really interested in around the sort of line that you walk or you get close to when you're trying to work a message to an audience that fits with sort of what they're interested in, their narrative. So let's use this as an example, because it's one that I had some immediate reaction to, which is, as I understand it, and I'm going to say I don't play Fortnite, although I have a 15-year-old who knows all about it, that in the game there was a task related to this campaign in which players could remove industrial sludge from a river. And the river was called Aviator River. And as a business journalist, I looked at that and thought, wow, the aviation industry is not happy about that. Why is it called Aviator River? Are planes really the worst offenders on emissions? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. Actually, the servers that are running this game are even worse emitters than the airplanes in the air. What worried me was this sort of amorphous grasp on fact and truth that we know we all live with. It's in the political discourse, it's out there. And when kids live in echo chambers, young people live in echo chambers, I worry that they're being fed things they already believe rather than things that are just pure solid fact. And I don't know, Allison, do you want to, I think you may all have thoughts about this, but do you want to weigh in on this?
Well, it's funny you jumped to that, because actually the reason it's called Aviator River is because President Biden loves aviator sunglasses, and that's like a big piece of his sort of image. And we sort of had fun facts in there. Champ and Major the dogs were in there, and Vice President Harris became known on the internet for her sneakers, so there was sort of like golden sneaker challenge. So we tried to sprinkle in fun pieces of their identities, in addition to so that specific challenge, the game itself. And we worked with a Fortnite build team to two really talented creators who built that game inside of Fortnite. And one thing for the audience is, Fortnite is actually a platform where there's a core game to it, but there's a way for creators to actually build experiences, and other and certain brands have actually, I think Grubhub and a few others have actually built sort of island experiences within it. And so, we worked on 6 challenges that illustrated actually the Biden-Harris Build Back Better plan. So it was like a bit educational, which we really were passionate about as well. And so that specific challenge had to do with the Climate Corps and some ideas around employing young people to in sort of environmentally friendly task forces to help improve our country and our infrastructure and our climate, and this idea that it's very, very intertwined, climate and the economy and jobs. And so that was something fun, where you got to ride a hoverboard and shoot a harpoon and collect things out of the river, and bring something fun to it. But there were sort of little signposts along the way that explained why. And so, that was because we had sort of the opportunity to partner with creators who built this, we were able to sort of bring the policy forward as well, which I think is really exciting.
Adrian, anything to add on that?
I was just going to add that the notion that they get caught in an echo chamber, I don't think is really accurate, because this generation consumes more content across more channels and filters more information and retains it at the speed of light. And so I think they're more curious than anything. And the challenge really is for us to cut through and get the attention in the channels that we want them and need them, in addition to going to where they're spending their time and getting their information. But love what Allison's talking about, of using the fun to educate on bigger problems in society.
I would agree. I think I'm not as articulate as my colleagues, so I would just say that we can all feel a little bit good that young people have the greatest bullshit detectors in the history of the world, and they use it rather freely and rather effectively. And it's not fun when you're on the wrong end of it. I would also say that, to Allison's point, one of the things that was uncovered in this last election through the methods that people employed was that, yes, young people presumed to have been apathetic, presumed to not want to go out and vote. They're very passionate about issues that they care about. They're very issue-driven. Climate change is an excellent example. And it gets back to what I said earlier. They can source as much information anytime they want. And when they're passionate about those issues, they do go out and get themselves informed. And again, they're not going to be force-fed content. They're going to want to have a role in curating and making their own content. And that changes the game and empowers them in a way that we were never empowered before. I use the example, and when I was a teenager, if I wanted to go home in the summer months and watch something new on TV, I couldn't. It was rerun season. If I wanted to go to HMV and buy 3 songs from my favorite bands, I had to buy 3 albums. We had to take what was on offer. Young people do not have to do that, and that's highly empowering to them.
We have some questions from our audience, and I want to get to one that's you're kind of hitting on here, but it's that there is this stereotype for millennials and Gen Z that they're lazy, unmotivated, they don't want to get involved. It sounds as though your experience has not been that with these groups. Where do you see it, Heidi? Where do you see that stereotype being overturned? Because it does exist out there. I guess even the idea of somebody sitting gaming, it seems like they're kind of unmotivated and uninvolved in anything but gaming. But I guess what we're trying to do is sort of upend that view and say, actually, they're involved in that thing, and that thing is more than just a game.
Well, look at the number of young Gen Zers that start companies before they even graduate from high school, right? If you think about it, they've been born with technology in their hands since the beginning. They are empowered, as Adrian was talking about earlier. There's no question they don't know the answer to, and they really believe in their role in innovation. And if you as a brand don't innovate, they'll innovate on your behalf. And because they have this sense of empowerment and this sense of innovation and this strong compass of what they want to do to create change in the world, this is where they're creating these companies. And we call them the Gen ZEOs. I've met many of them who've already had 3 companies before they get out of high school, legitimate companies that have been crowdsourced and funded and are making money and have sold. And so I think that this is act. They won't just have the ideas, but they actually act on the ideas.
Allison or Adrian, anything to add to that?
I mean, I think that's just such a wrong, I hope nobody on the line actually believes that, because I just, I think it's essential for different generations to just have empathy within the generations and understand that, that there's differences. I think we all learned that even with, the current pandemic and the amount of Zoom that's going on, or like in office time, people might have said, with the millennial workforce, they just, they don't come to the office in the same way. And I think we maybe learned through the pandemic that maybe we don't need to go to the office. Maybe you can be efficient through Zoom and doing your work, but doing other things as well. And I just think it's essential to differences aren't negatives. I think there's every, generation brings something to the table. And I think as marketers, it's essential to reach people where they are and not without any kind of judgment about them or how they spend their time or anything. It's just, hey, if this is, if 75% of American households have a gamer in them, I mean, you have to be doing things with gaming. You have to reach people where they are and speak to people in a way where they're receiving that information. You can't write off a generation. This is a rising group of people with extreme power, whether that's buying power or voting power, or who deeply care about issues and care about the world that they're inheriting. And so I think just the message is to treat everyone with respect and to find ways to connect with them in the channels by which they prefer to receive information.
Yeah, young people are different, and one of the things that happens too much, and we experience it, and I'm sure my colleagues experience it, is people try and understand this new behavior by trying to apply it to their own paradigm. Well, when I was young, and it's just profoundly different. There's no other way to describe it, and so gaming is not a hobby. Yes, Mr. or Mrs. Chief Marketing Officer, 35 years ago when you played Pac-Man, it was highly antisocial. Your parents were worried you might get scurvy because you hadn't seen the sun in 3 days. What's gaming today? Young people are not going on Facebook. Their gaming is their social network. My CFO had 2 people at his wedding he'd only ever met on the Xbox console. You try telling him that those aren't real friendships. Those aren't real relationships. One of the things that we've struggled with in the past, and it's changing a lot, but some people would tell you, us in a boardroom, I'm sorry, I can't understand why people would watch other people play video games. Meanwhile, that person's friends and family in the last 48 hours might have seen Martha Stewart baste a turkey, someone hoard a bunch of stuff in their attic, someone sell real estate in Los Angeles. All of that is acceptable, but yet watching other people play video games, can't be a productive way to spend your time. So we have to recognize the sands have shifted. Behavior is different. That doesn't mean they're lazy. In fact, there were a lot of times in my career I'd be afraid to raise the issues in my company that my young colleagues raise and are not afraid to do so. And quite honestly, it's making us a better business. I don't think they're lazy. I just think they're different.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly those of us with gamers in our lives, and the pandemic has exacerbated a lot of our view of all of this stuff, I think, understand that they're not down there alone. It's in the basement of my house. That's how they see their friends. It's a community, it's connectivity, it's a social experience. All of that obviously is why this is working from the point of view of messaging. We have some great questions. A couple of them kind of overlap here. One is, you can see how important it is when things go viral in a campaign, a meme or the like. But the question is, how do you make it go viral? How do you know something is going to hit? And the other question is, what are the 3 top tips for success and engagement? Kind of similar, but I mean, obviously this is why you get paid the big bucks in marketing. But it is interesting. What have you seen that really works? And Heidi, I'll start with you. Allison and Adrian, I'm sure you have thoughts about this, but when you've seen something, what is it that really hits with this particular group or platforms?
I guess I could speak to our biggest meme, who is Gritty. That was like a fantastic surprise that came to the league, right? And the first thing is, you never know when you're going to have, if you try to create a meme, it's not going to be successful. It has to be authentic. It has to be adopted by grassroots, involvement from fans. But Gritty, when Philly had introduced him to a lot of criticism from, their fans and their fan base, and they got chirped a little bit by the Penguins. All of a sudden, when that chirp came from the Penguins, Philly fans rallied around Gritty, and Gritty was their guy, and they were not going to turn their back. They weren't going to criticize him. And then Gritty did the cultural connection with making fun of Kim Kardashian pouring champagne over her back. And he did that shot. He did that exact same pose and broke the internet. And from that night on, Gritty was on every talk show. He was on the, in the morning shows. Has been woven into pop culture in every way possible. And so it's like capturing lightning in a bottle. There's no formula or recipe for it, but when you have it, you need to ride the wave.
Adrian or Allison?
For me, that is 100% true. I certainly can't walk into a staff meeting and tell someone to make some content and make sure it's viral. There is we manage to run a predominantly user-generated content business fairly well. And what I would tell you, and I'm glad there's only 1,000 people tuning in because I shouldn't let this get out, but I don't even know how to explain how we manage that well. Allison's used a very important word a few times, which is it has to be authentic. But we all know authentic's not an active word. I can't ask anyone tuning in to go stand in the corner and be authentic for us. So it's very hard to describe, but again, being very disciplined about going to the person you want to, going to that young person's turf, talking to them at their level, understanding their perspective, not trying to foist things on them. Those are the things that you have to do in order to get that tick mark that, yes, you resonated with me in a genuine way. We have, young kids. You have a 15-year-old. When your kid was young, when you talk to them like they were a real person and not making goo-goo, noises and stuff like that, that's when the relationship strengthens. And so it's talking to people at eye level and understanding their world from their perspective. Those would be my tips.
And I'll add to that, and this is really drawing on my time from Tubular, which, we had, it's a data platform that's used by, 250 enterprise customers ranging from BuzzFeed to the Washington Post to Viacom. And, I think what I would always say in advising people trying to create content, number one is don't bank on a viral video. That's like putting your life savings in a lottery ticket. You just don't do that. And so there's kind of 3 C's of success. One is content, the second is consistency, and the third is collaboration. And so first and foremost, it's about the content. It's got to be good. It's got to connect with an audience. There has to be something special about it. And that hits the zeitgeist in some way. But you have to build a foundation for that. It doesn't come out of nowhere typically. And so this idea of consistency, if you're for example, like a YouTube star that's trying to build an audience or a brand or what have you, you need to be putting out regular content. People need to understand, okay, it comes out on Tuesdays, or, this is a series that we're doing and building, and sort of build that audience so that when that when something goes viral, it's there's sort of a foundation there that it came from in some way. And then the third piece is collaboration. So if you don't have much of an audience, the way to start to build an audience is to work with other creators and influencers and partner in that way and share audience and grow together. And so I think, you got to get out there and start building your content engine. And by the way, while viral is amazing, that's, the internet moves so fast that it's done. And so you actually would prefer to have a bit more of a consistent audience. And I think Gritty's been amazing in that, like, it's not just a one-hit wonder. There's sort of this continuous content that comes out around it. And so I think actually your goal should not be viral. It should be to build a passionate and consistent audience, and to really connect with people and build.
One of the questions asked here, and I can tell, I know there are a lot of people who probably think about marketing for a living and messaging and reaching people, and it has to do with just the evolution of platforms. What's different about marketing on a gaming platform versus Reddit or TikTok, or you go back what you might say back a generation to the Facebooks of the world. How is it evolving? How does your thinking change around how you're going to do it based on how those platforms are consumed?
Content's really short now. The attention span on content has gone down and continues to decline. There's a mix of highly professional produced content and real and raw, and you're always optimizing that. And so often you see the real and raw get a lot more engagement than the perfectly produced. So it's a mindset shift for a lot of marketers about how and when and where you spend your resources and what is good at quality content. So I think really suspending judgment on that and making sure that you're getting, the real, the raw, the user generated combined with your professional content and making it quick. And then optimizing the content by platform. Every platform is different. A Reddit platform, just by their Super Bowl ad alone, that was the most Reddit thing you could do, right? It was fantastic. That you want to have a different engagement there than you want to in Instagram stories, for example.
And every platform is different. Every platform is different. That's the most important thing to remember, right? You wouldn't put the same piece of content on TV that you put on the radio. And you wouldn't put the same piece of content that you put on, YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok. And I know as a marketer, it's very challenging because you have a limited amount of, resources and bandwidth. And so I think, everything starts with data and understanding where your audience lives and who you're actually trying to speak to. And then understanding who's on each platform, and then understanding the content you create for each platform. And it is essential to be deliberate in that way. You can't just put a piece of content somewhere and then recut it for other ones. Mm-hmm. And so and then the other piece of advice is, it's also good to keep a finger on the pulse of rising platforms, because that's where you really have the chance to break through. The biggest stars on YouTube are the ones who were there in the early days and built an audience. And there's always people who break through over time, but it's so much easier, to be first to, for example, Clubhouse is a trendy new platform. If you're one of the first people there, you're going to build up an audience faster. And I think, obviously you don't want to waste resources on platforms that might go away. But I think one of the pieces of a marketer is just understanding where your audience lives, creating the right content for that platform, and trying to be first when you can, so you have a bit of a head start.
And it's interesting you say wasting resources on platforms that might go away. So far, none of them have gone away, right? Facebook still has, billion people on it. You've got Snapchat, people still use that. TikTok was going to be gone, and all of a sudden now you're getting billions of views on it. They are here. They appeal to different people at different times, and you use different platforms for different reasons. Like just going through a day in the life of a young person, and what's the first thing they check? Is it their Snapchat? Is it their Instagram? Is it their Facebook? They have a distinct order in which they go to check in on what's happened in life before they start their own day. So I think it's really interesting. It does make it so challenging from a marketer perspective, though, to think about, how do you have meaningful and relevant content for each of those platforms? And that's just the fun that we get to have in this new world.
Yeah, and I think you have to hire people who live and breathe those platforms. And I also think there are data and tools to help you understand them. So for example, just by the data, the stars on Instagram are all traditional celebrities, people that whose names you would recognize, pop stars and celebrities, singers, but on YouTube, it's a completely different group of people. On TikTok, it's a completely different group of people. And you have to know that there's actually data and tools now, and that tells you that information. And it's not okay to say, I just don't know. I mean, you can go on the platforms and click around and look. You can use data and tools. You can hire people who have that DNA. You can work with agencies you trust who have that DNA. But the information is available, and it's essential to work with the right types of people and tools to be successful.
But also, it bears repeating too that there's all kinds of new platforms and all kinds of new ways for marketers to connect. And again, I've said it enough, you have to go to where you have to fish where the fish are. However, it really I can guarantee you, we could talk about synergies all day long, but if you push ordinary anemic content through an exciting distribution channel, it will get no play. Okay. It really begins and ends with content. And so when you think back, try to use another political example, yes, social media helped propel Barack Obama to the presidency, but he was Barack Obama, a pretty charismatic guy. It didn't work so well with John McCain. You have to serve at the altar of content. And Allison used 3 new C words that I like. I would add a 4th, which is compel. Every meeting you have about your content, you've got to be out of the box. You've got to compel. Heidi's right. Short form content. You've got to capture people's attention and imagination early. So always think, how can I compel? How can I compel a reaction?
I want to hit on a subject that's not specific to anything that you guys are doing or have done, and yet it kind of underpins all of it, which is the data. What's different here is all of the information that is now available to the marketers, to the companies that want a message, and the people that are selling their platforms to do so. And it may be more true of other platforms. So I'm not sort of making this specific to you 3, but it doesn't feel as though our policies and our frameworks have necessarily kept pace with, as they never do, with the innovation and the speed and the new technologies. Do you worry about that? Do you think about it? Do you think your communities will concern themselves with how their data is being shared or used or manipulated, or any of the things? And we can throw in the mix here really nefarious use, like Russian interference in elections. What if Enthusiast Gaming's platforms become a way that some foreign actor tries to manipulate your elections? There are multiple levels to this, but I'm just kind of curious whether you think the policies in place now protect all of the participants. And Adrian, I'll start with you, because you're running a business and you've got to think about all of your privacy issues and your data controls.
It's exceedingly important, Amanda. And again, what we feel is going to be beneficial for us in the long term. We have to make that a priority, of course. But again, I think what is happening, we could debate the motivations for why what's about to happen is going to happen, but third-party data is going to become harder and harder to access. And so third-party cookies, people like me exist in a number of different data sets, and you can be a lazy marketer and rely on third-party data, and I think that's not going to be the way to go in the future. Certainly for us, aggregating first-party communities and engaging meaningfully directly with our audience, I think will increase in value over time, because there is a privacy revolution happening, and we have to be very mindful about it, and so do marketers.
And from our perspective, agree with you that first-party data is so important, and we've been focusing a lot on how do we harness all this data. You've got your real world data, you've got your digital data, and all the transactional data that happens when you buy a jersey, buy a ticket, go to a game, participate in social media. All of this creates a picture about who you are. And what we try to do is use this to help us personalize our communications to our fans. And this is another really important part of the young generation, is they want you to show me you know me. I'll reward you with my attention if you reward me with the content that is relevant to me. And so the laws that are around privacy are hugely important, and all the data privacy that we have is important. But we're seeing the shift now, which is giving people the control of whether or not they want their information shared and how it's being shared, and just education and knowledge and transparency about it, I think is really the key. I do think you'll see younger people have a different relationship with privacy than the people who are actually writing the policies right now. And so it will continue to evolve over time.
Allison, if you got something to add, feel free. Otherwise, I'm going to ask what might be my last question.
Yeah, go ahead for your last question.
Okay. Because it comes from the room, as it were, and I sort of love where it goes in the sense that it hits on so many important things right now, which is the question was gaming has allowed previously excluded people, and for example, people with disabilities, to participate socially. Can you speak to this? And when I read that, I think that's amazing and so true, right? Such a leveling. These platforms are so leveling, which is, of course, their appeal. But it also occurs to me, and I'm going to start with you, Allison, just in terms of how marketers need to be thinking differently about this kind of wonderful fact, which is given how much we care and are thinking more actively about inclusivity in every way, how big a sea change is it that this is where the messaging is going to happen for a fast-growing group of people that will have more and more power in our world?
One of the motto of the Biden-Harris digital team was battle for the soul of the internet, and we really believed in the power of the internet for good and for inclusivity and for love and for empathy, and we believed that it was possible to use the internet to tell a positive story and to connect with people. And I think this last question very much hits on that and shows all the positives of the internet, which is it's really it's an equalizer. It's a democratic place where someone in their basement has the same broadcasting power as NBC, and there's a home for many different types of communities and for many groups of people, and to find each other and to connect, across the country, across the world. And I think it's essential for marketers to know that. And it's also, I hope that people know that, good and positive messages, that can travel as well as sort of negative and trolls, and that was something that was so deeply inspiring about the Biden-Harris campaign, to me personally, is how do we use internet and content and connectivity to really reach people, and to reach people on their own turf, how they want to be reached, with authentic content, and so I'll leave it at that, but I think it's an inspiring message to end on, which is, there's a home for everyone on the internet, there's communities for everyone, and it's our goal to kind of reach them and connect with them in that way.
I would say from my perspective, we have an incredible personal story to share. We own one of the biggest esports organizations in the world, being Luminosity. We also own, obviously, a number of websites. And one of our websites had a reality competition called So You Think You Can Stream, to find the next big gaming personality. And when we checked in after the finals, we found that the overwhelming fan favorite was a guy from Detroit named Rocky. He was an incredible gamer and incredibly entertaining. And here's the thing, Rocky is a quadriplegic. Rocky plays with a quad stick and is the best gamer in the world using a quad stick. We immediately signed Rocky to Luminosity, and he's a star. He is inspiring all our players, NFL stars that are involved with us, like Richard Sherman, NHL stars like Ty Domi are sending messages and bragging about hanging out with Rocky. People magazine did a big feature on him, and he is a star in the world of gaming, and we're so proud of him, and we're not going to stop until we get a Rocky No Hands. That's his moniker, by the way, Rocky No Hands. We're not going to stop until we see his life story on Netflix. So I may reach out to my colleagues to help me with that. But that shows you the kinds of things that are happening, and I would agree with you, man. And it's inspirational, it's equalizing, it's inclusive, and it's just really cool.
All right, Heidi, try to top that one. It brought a tear to my eye. So let's go. It's a high bar. Last word to you.
So bringing it all home, we have to center ourselves on this generation and the fact that it is the most diverse generation in our lifetimes. And in the US, at least, by 2024, the majority of the population will be non-white. And so the whole idea of inclusivity is going to take a completely different meaning with this generation. And I will say that with our youth advisors that we meet with on a regular basis, gaming was the number 2 thing they talked about. Inclusivity is the number 1 reason that they wanted to join the Power Players Board and have a role in how they can make the game that they love so much available and welcoming and inclusive to all, whether it's the color of your skin, your gender identification, your sexual preference, or your sled hockey, your ability to actually play. So this generation gives me the greatest hope of all that they will truly change the world.
Well, I love that note to finish on. I have been so enjoying talking to all of you. I know that people who are listening get so much out of it. I just want to thank you all so much for giving your very valuable time. Adrian, Allison, Heidi, thank you so much. And I am going to turn it back over to Anita.
Thanks. And I'll also echo that. Heidi, Adrian, Allison, on behalf of the Canadian Club, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a fascinating conversation, and I think if I reflect on what I heard all of you say, it's that if you want to reach the Gen Z cohort, you need to start by respecting them, respecting the video games that they love, and recognize that this is not a fringe idea. This is where the majority of your audience lives, and their behaviors are different from what we're used to before, and you would need to keep that in mind for starters. Amanda, as always, it's wonderful to have you to guide today's conversation. Guests, we hope that you'll join us for some of our upcoming events. On Wednesday, February 17th, we're going to be hosting a panel of trailblazing Black executives who are doing the work to nurture and amplify Black excellence and leadership in business. This expert panel with leaders from Capital One, CIBC, Boyden, and the Canadian Olympic Committee will highlight what's working, what we're missing, and how we can leverage immediate opportunities for a more equitable today and tomorrow. Thank you again to Norton Rose Fulbright for sponsoring today's event, and thank you to our AV sponsor, Van Valkenburg Communications and livemeeting.ca for making it possible for us to come together virtually today. Guests, thank you for joining us. Please stay healthy and stay safe.